In the late summer of 2001, Amrullah Saleh flew to Frankfurt, Germany, to meet a man he knew as Phil, a CIA officer. Saleh handled intelligence liaisons, among other tasks, for Ahmed Shah Massoud, the legendary Afghan guerrilla commander who was then holding out against the Taliban and Al Qaeda from a shrinking haven in the northeast of his country. At 28, Saleh had a stern, serious demeanor. He was clean-shaven and kept his dark hair cropped short. He spoke English well, but deliberately, in a sonorous accent. Saleh typically met his CIA handlers at a hotel. He and Phil discussed a cache of spy gear the CIA had organized for Massoud. The delivery included communications equipment and night vision goggles that would allow Massoud's intelligence collectors on the front lines to better watch and eavesdrop on Taliban and Al Qaeda fighters. The CIA had been training and equipping Massoud's intelligence directorate for several years, but the program was limited in scope. Under the policies of the Clinton administration and more recently the George W. Bush administration, the CIA could not provide weapons to support Massoud's war of resistance against the Taliban. The agency could only provide Massoud non-lethal equipment that might aid the agency's hunt for Osama bin Laden, the fugitive emir of Al Qaeda, who moved elusively around Taliban-ruled areas of Afghanistan. One shipment had included a giant remote-controlled telescope. At another point, the CIA considered supplying Massoud with a balloon fixed with cameras to spy on Al Qaeda camps. But between Afghanistan's heavy winds and the possibility that neighboring China might misinterpret the dirigible, they decided against it. Frankfurt was a logistics hub. The CIA's supply lines for Massoud were jerry-rigged and constrained by caution at headquarters. By early 2001, Langley had ordered CIA officers to stop flying in Massoud's helicopters because they weren't judged to be safe enough. Phil and his colleagues usually delivered equipment directly to Dushanbe, where Saleh ran an office for Massoud. Tajikistan was recovering from a bloody civil war, and there was occasional political unrest in the capital. That could make it difficult for CIA officers to travel there, but for the most part they found a way. Once in a while, however, they had to ask Saleh to pick up equipment in Germany and carry it the rest of the way himself. The CIA officers involved knew the German government was highly sensitive about anything the agency did on German territory without informing the BND, the principal German intelligence agency. But the supplies to Massoud were uniformly non-lethal. Some of the equipment might skirt the borders of export licensing rules, but it was not obviously illegal, as arms and ammunition would be. Massoud's lieutenants were experienced smugglers. Sometimes Saleh would have to figure out how to transport CIA equipment on his own. This made Saleh nervous. He did not relish answering the questions of German police or customs officers at Frankfurt Airport. "Where did you buy this?" He would have no answer. "Do you have any receipts?" "No." "What will you use these night vision goggles for?" It would be unwise to mention the Afghan war. How did you obtain the funds to buy a $5,000 satellite phone and subscription? Saleh had become an intelligence specialist only recently, but he was an avid student of the profession. In 1999, Massoud had selected him and 8 other senior aides and commanders to travel to the United States to attend a CIA training course put on by the Counter-Terrorist Center under strict secrecy rules. Few people outside the center knew about it. The curriculum partly covered the arts of intelligence, identifying and assessing sources, recruitment, technical collection, analysis, and report writing. The paramilitary courses covered assessing targets, maneuvering and communicating in the field, and so on. In Nevada, the trainees climbed a mountain with a telescope to practice reconnaissance operations in conditions that replicated those in Afghanistan. The training reflected the CIA Counter-Terrorist Center's hope, a quixotic one in the view of many agency analysts familiar with Afghanistan, that Massoud's guerrillas might someday locate and trap bin Laden, even though the Al Qaeda leader rarely traveled to the north of the country, where Massoud's guerrillas were. At the CIA school, Saleh was a bit bored by the paramilitary instruction. He was more drawn to the craft of intelligence collection. He wanted a fuller understanding about intelligence systems and methods. He peppered the CIA officers on the faculty with questions. He found a few who were willing to give him extra time, and he tried to understand how the CIA worked. When the course was over, Saleh went to Borders to buy a stack of books about spy services and intelligence history. Since then, he had earned respect at the CIA. The officers with whom he worked assessed Saleh as tough, disciplined, honest, and professional, if also a bit young to command authority in Afghan society, which venerated the aged. To solve his shipping problems in Germany, Saleh tried to draw on his self-education, particularly concerning the methods of Israeli intelligence. Mossad had networks of helpers around the world, not just employees and paid agents or informers, but friends of the service who could be called upon for ad hoc favors. Saleh telephoned an Afghan-German businessman in Frankfurt whom he had cultivated for such assistance. "I have something I need you to do. I need your help," Saleh said. The man suggested they meet at a hotel.